So, as I mentioned, in the gospel parallels, different ways of telling the story of the resurrection. And one of the things that scholars teach us is that, the gospels were written down 50, 60, 70 years after the time of Christ. And they tell us something about that first Easter morning, and they tell us a lot about what was going on in those different communities who were already arguing and fighting among themselves about who was going to be the leader. So whoever got to the tomb first tends to be who that community believed. Like it's Peter, kind of in this version, and John. You've got a foot race to the cross between John and between Peter and the beloved disciples. So those resurrection narratives tell us something too, sadly, about conflict going in the early church, about who was going to be the spokesperson and the leader. We've talked a lot about Luke's gospel was kind of in the first generation of kind of female scholars thought of as really the most feminist gospel, and then it's like, not so much, because the women sort of get pushed out and their voices get lost, and they really get kind of lost in the second part of Luke's gospel as well. And so the other part kind of behind this is not just the different resurrection narratives, but the different narratives about the crucifixion and the different ideas about what the cross represents. And I think a big, loud part of the church has really kind of globbed onto this idea of original sin, and Jesus had to die on a cross. His whole life was a 100-yard dash to the cross to die in our place as evil people so that we could live in eternity with God. And then there's the more, version of we're made in God's image. We're blessed people, and the cross is more a representation of how we, in fear, turn away from that love. And that honestly speaks to me a lot more. And I have to say, Easter can be a hard Sunday to preach on. This year, Easter's a hard Sunday to preach on because the world's a hot mess, right? And, there's a lot of crazy, and there's a lot of ugly, and there's a lot of difficult. And so how do we proclaim this word still in a really powerful way? So we'll hear Luke's gospel, and we'll try to stay true to Luke's version of it. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they, the women, came to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly 2 men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified, and they bowed their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, he has risen. Remember how Jesus told you while he was still in Galilee that the human one must be handed over to sinners and crucified, and on the third day rise again." Then they remembered Jesus' words. And returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up and ran into the tomb, stooping and looking in. He saw the linen cloths by themselves. Then he went home, amazed at what had happened.